So here we go with the, so here we have the maxilla, the two maxilla on the front of your face. And those have those processes, they're called alveolar processes. And those are very, very important for holding your upper teeth. And as we're going to see next week, this connection here of the teeth, which are also considered bones, right, the strongest bones in the body. So the connection here of the teeth to the maxilla, as well as the mandible, those connections, they are not bone to bone. There is no connection that goes bone to bone, right? So unless you have a fusion of the bone, and this is not a fusion, right? So in between the teeth and the maxilla, you do have joints. Okay, so you do have connections that are going to keep these teeth in place. So here we are looking from the bottom, looking up at the bones of the face and also the bones of the skull here. We see that you have this bone here that is the zygomatic bone, right? And this is what makes your cheekbones. That's what makes the process here. It's called zygomatic process. That makes the cheekbones. And here you have your maxilla, right? There are two of them that are going to join, like right in the middle, sagittal line. And then at the back here, you have the palatine bones. They're all the way in the back of the mouth. And we had also seen last time that that we have here the sinuses, right? That are spaces that are supposed to be only filled with air, and they are very important. Some sinuses, like the sinuses up here from the frontal bone, you got to remember all your cranial bones, okay? All the ones that we went over. Okay, so some of the sinuses are just to make the bones lighter, not just very heavy, because if it is going to be all compact bone, then it's going to be really heavy. I mean, the head is going to be very heavy to carry around, right? But then some other sinuses, they are filled with air, and there are spaces here that are they're all covered here with mucous membranes, and these spaces, they also serve to warm up the air before the air gets into the lungs. Okay, now getting. So here, when you look at this facial bone, the palatine bones, okay, so the two bones that fuse here with the development. When you look at the palatine bones, I had also mentioned, right, that those bones are it's quite common for those bones not to develop properly during fetal development if the mother doesn't take enough folate, right? So in order for proper bone development, so there must be some level of folate in the diet. Okay, so here you see how those palatines are looking, not only from under the mouth right here, but you see how the bones they have this type of squared U shape. Then they go also to the inside of the head. So looking here at this figure, you can imagine that this could be a very nice figure to use like in a test setting, for example, right? So this is when we do a little dance like, clue kind of thing. Do you need to know those bones? Yes. Are you going to remember that you need to know those bones? Yes, good. So which one is this big one over here? Frontal bone. What about this guy here? What was it? Zygomatic bone. I was like, this guy here? Sorry? It starts with the maxillar. Yes, maxillary bones. And this guy here, did you cover that one yet? Mandible. That's the easy one. That's the only one that moves around, right? And now looking here at the nasal bones. Let's look what is going on here. Okay, so here, when you look at this part here of the nose, we see here that the back here of the nose is made of that ethmoid bone, the very interesting shaped bone, right? Actually, all of those are very interesting shapes, right? And then you have the maxilla here that makes a huge part of the bony part of the nose. And of course, you know the nose is not all bone, right? I mean, the tip of it is cartilaginous, right? But this is a bony part. Then you also have the nasal bone, right? This is the one that goes on top here. And let's see, okay, so this is the part for the nose. And of course, here are some reviews on the rest of the bones, okay? So here, for more bone on the face, when you look at the mandible, you see that it has some very important characteristics. Okay, so first thing that is very prominent, it has this mandibular angle. So this is right in the back here of the mouth, right, of the face here. And besides that, it has a body. So this here is the body, okay, and it has protuberances. That, okay, so this here is what makes the chin. That is called a mental protuberance. Does anybody know why this thing is called a mental? Does that mean that the person that named it was kind of crazy? Sorry? Okay, anybody want to guess? Yeah. Not really. Mental. When you say mental, what do you think? Something to do with the head, right? So the curious reason why this is called a mental protuberance is because in ancient Greek, they used to think that the bigger the chin, the more intelligent the person would be. You'll figure that one out, right? So they used to look at your chin. It's like, oh, you got a big chin. You must be really smart. So that's how this bone got the name. I mean, this feature of the bone got the name, right? That's odd, but you know, a lot of things are odd, right? So that's the mental. So when you look at this part here and you say, what's the part, what do you call this part of the mandible? And you say, oh, mental, of course. So, all right, so here, looking at the sagittal cut of the face, right, of the head, and you're going to look at the nasal septal. So the nasal septum is the part that is like right in the middle. So what is it that makes up all this agglomerate of bones here, right? So remember that you do have your ethmoid bone back there, you have your nasal bone, frontal bone, right? Frontal bone over there that also has a frontal sinuses here. And you have the vomer, that's the other bone here that's going to be also part of the nose. So here is the nose, it's going to be the cartilage of the nose, okay? And you have your palatine bone over there. And what is the name of this bone that you only see a little piece here? This bone right there. That is holding the teeth. Is that the maxilla? Yeah, it's right there. Yeah, that's the maxilla, right? So remember, if it's holding the teeth on the top part of the mouth, that's the maxilla. If it is holding the teeth at the bottom part of the mouth, that is the mandible. Are you going to remember that?
Yes.
Yes, am I going to ask you about that? Yes, all right. So here, coming back to this palatine bone back there, I did mention that folate, lack of folate, that you find in green vegetables. Folate, the name comes from folia, that means leaf. Okay, so green leaf, specifically green leafy vegetables. If you don't have enough of that during pregnancy, you can develop this condition that is called cleft palate. And there are many variations of cleft palate. And there are some cleft palates that extend all the way to the front of the mouth, and then that becomes like a cleft lip, and then cleft lip with the cleft palate. Sometimes you only have the cleft lip. There are several. This kind of malformation is quite common, but a good thing is that it's easily, relatively easily fixed. Actually, so here again with the facial bones, just for you to make sure you know which bones we are going to be focusing on here. Here. Okay. So what you have to know here, you have to know this zygomatic bone, frontal bone, palatine, maxilla, vomer. These are all the parts that are also, they're very important for the formation for the nose and the facial bones to know. Oh, so here comes your first question. So, scientific name for the cheekbone is so most people got it right here. Is your zygomatic bone. All right. So with that, we move here to look a bit more into the sinuses. Okay. So we know that those just, sorry, I have to close the email or it's gonna be driving us crazy. So email, where is the email now? Sorry. Closed. Okay. So what are the sinuses? Right, so you should know about these air-filled spaces in the bones. You have big one here, that's the frontal sinus, that's your frontal bone up there. Okay. Your ethmoidal sinus, right back here. And then you have here ethmoidal sinus, sphenoidal sinus back here. And this big one here is your maxillary sinus. Those are the ones that are really hurting when you have a sinus infection or a cold and you get all stuffed up, right? Now, not only these sinuses make the bones lighter, but another function of it is actually to help with diction or with the way that we use language, right? Because as the most sophisticated language using animals that we know of, right, in this planet at least, we have a lot of sounds that if we don't have those sinuses open, we can actually not make the sounds. And I'm sure that everybody has experienced, like once you get a cold and then those sinuses are blocked, and then you try to say something and something doesn't come out right. You know what I mean? Yeah. Okay. And besides that, with this connection of the nose and the throat and the back of the mouth, you also have this interconnection of taste and smell. And that's another reason why you have a sinus infection or a cold, the food doesn't taste right. So there is just something not right about the food, right? It just becomes kind of like tasteless, right? So that has to do with this, the function of the connection of the nose and the mouth. Okay, so here more on the mandible. This is very, very interesting bone, right? It's one of the ones that really moves around, right? So the mandible has this part that is very important. It's called the ramus. So this is the part right here. This is the part that's going to connect to the skull. Okay, so right there, this is the ramus. And then the body is going to be this part here. Okay, so this is the body. And this is the ramus right here. So the body is going to connect with the teeth. So this body also is going to have those alveolar processes. Okay, those are the ones is going to connect to the teeth. Now the body has an opening here that's called the mental foramen. So when you see an opening, is you know that's called foramen, right? So there is an opening here for nerves to go through mental foramen. Okay, now what is important to know here? Okay, this process right there is an important process that is going to fit into a socket, okay, in the skull. So this is called the condylar process right there, okay? And let me see, besides this condylar process, process is something that bulges out of the bone, right? So besides this here that sticks the bone to the head, the rest of the head, there is another process right there, okay? So this one here is called the coronoid process. Do I have the number? Right there. So there are two of them. So these are the coronoid processes, but those are not really attaching to other bones. They are really important for muscle attachment, okay, for tendon and muscle attachment. Okay. So what you need to know here, you have the ramus of the mandible right there, body of the mandible. So those are parts you have to know. Condylar process, coronoid process. All right, so besides all of those facial bones, you also have some bones in the head that are not connected to other bones. So those are called associated bones. Okay, so there are basically two places where you have associated bones. One is inside of your ear. So you have those auditory ossicles, the tiny, tiny bones. So they're called ossicles. So I put this picture here just so you know how tiny they are. And they're called malleus, incus, and stapes, right? Actually, I just know the names in Portuguese, so I had to learn the names in English. So you know what these things are? Some kind of tools, right, that you use to shape wood or shape metal or something like that. So those are the names that were given because they resemble those types of tools. So this is stapes, like you step on this thing to go on the horse or something, right? So those are the tiny, tiny little bones. And then you have this other bone here that's called the hyoid bone. And this bone is not connected to anything. And is just before your vocal cords, right? Just before the throat. So this is basically connected to muscles and ligaments. It's not connected to other bones. Okay, so here are your associated bones. Okay. So a bit more of this hyoid bone here. So the primary function of this is to work as an attachment structure. Now, attachment for what? What would you have up here that is important to be attached? Your tongue is obvious, kind of. So for the tongue and muscles at the floor of the mouth. Okay, so this is your hyoid associated bone. Oh, here's another question. Which of the following bones does not articulate directly with any other bone in the skeleton? So this is your hyoid bone, right? I had other people answering other clavicle, mandible. If you answer mandible, seriously, come and see me. What is the mandible? Is it connected to another bone? Hopefully. Okay. So the hyoid is the one that is, just kind of floating in there, connected to muscles and is supporting the tongue. Okay. So here, the nose. Let's see a bit more about the nose. We know we have bone section and then you have cartilage section. So what is it interesting about the nose, right? So we have here this section, again, this sagittal section that is showing the bones that are they're coming together here that make part of this perpendicular section of the nose, okay? So just be familiar with these bones that are part of this structure, and we just went over all of those bones. Now, one thing that we added here is this septal cartilage. Okay, so this is a part of cartilage that we hadn't seen that before. Now, being cartilage, what do we know that is very typical of cartilaginous tissue? First, it doesn't have blood vessels, right? And, sorry? Can cells drain? Tensile strain, yeah, and it has flexibility too. But what about cell division? Can cartilaginous tissue undergo cell division? Yes. So is it possible that as a person gets older, the nose will get bigger? Okay, let's vote. Then the bone tissue doesn't really grow, right? But the cartilaginous tissue can grow a little bit. So if you look at pictures of somebody in their 30s compared to 70s or so, it's not an impression that the nose looks a little bigger. It actually does get a little bigger. Okay, so that's the cartilaginous part of it. So know about this vomer bone down here. There's also making part of this of the nose. Okay. So when you look inside of the nose, very interesting structures, right? So you have here the middle of the nose, that is the nasal septum, like right in the middle, okay? And then you have these structures here. They're called turbinates because they go down here, like they look like drops, okay? They have this indentation that goes into these cavities, and basically it increases the surface area of contact of the air once we inhale. Okay, so those are called turbinates. And of course, here is the opening, right, the nasal cavities right here. And you also have those sinuses, like right on the side, right? So what is going on with this structure here? Now, if you look at this section, you see that, of course, a lot of it is open, but then you can see from the side view these structures that are going to the inside of the cavity. Okay. So basically, those turbinates are increasing the surface area. So most of the nasal cavity is covered by mucosa. Now you should remember what is it? What is a mucosa thing, right? So when you look at the mucosa tissue, you are going to have pseudo-stratified, ciliated, columnar cells. Remember those guys? Yep. Yeah, remember. So it's like they're coming back, okay? Because that's a really important part of this mucosal tissue of the nose. And remember, those are ciliated, right? Ciliated columnar cells. And what is it that the cilia are doing? Pushing stuff out that shouldn't get to the lungs, right? So important part of the mucosa in here. So under this epithelium, we have the lamina propria, like right there. Okay, and that's where you're going to find blood vessels and also other glands. But here is a quick review of epithelium and derma, epidermis and derma. Okay, so what is important to know here? Let me see. So yeah, these open areas are really for humidifying the air and warming it up so you don't get very dry air and cold air into the lungs, which is of course not a problem here in South Florida, right? But talking about areas that are really dry and really cold, so this structure actually has function there. Okay. Oh, and now the eye, the orbit of the eye. So the eye sockets here. What is it that is going to make here? Do you have to know of this? No. You have to know the parts that are highlighted. What is making up the eye hole? So first thing is your frontal bone. We have seen that before, right? Second thing we see here, we see the sphenoid bone from the back right there, right? Then you have your zygomatic bone right here. And that's the same one that's going to make your cheekbone, right? Zygomatic bone. Then the maxilla from this side, and so you're going around this eye socket here, okay? The orbit, going from here, from the frontal bone to this other bone here, okay? Zygomatic bone. And on the back here, you have a sphenoid bone. And then you go to the front here, you have your maxilla. And here in the back you have your ethmoid bone, and of course your tiny lacrimal bone over here. Okay, so that allows us to really say what are the bones that are involved here in this formation of this orbis. What are the bones that you don't see here that are part of the cranium? And why am I asking that? You should know what constitutes the orbit of the eye. And because you're going to get a question. So for this question, consult your friends, think about it. Which bone does not form the orbital cavity? Just talked about it. Temporal bone. Where are your temporal bones? Okay, let's all touch our temporal bones. Class exercise. All right. So, a bit more here on the mandible. This is a nice picture showing that choroid process that is attaching to muscles here. And that is very important for chewing and talking, right? Just go back to that. Okay, so just a few more pictures here on the mandible is a very, very important bone to know. When you look at these processes up here, like two of each side, right? You have the one that is very round. So this one here is going to attach to the other bone in the cranium, right? It's going to attach. This other one here is this is to bone. This other one is to muscle. Okay, so you gotta know this choroid process, and the other one is the condylar process. You gotta know that about the mandible. That's why I'm putting several images of it, right? The mandibular notch is right between the two processes. Let me see anything else here. I'm not going to ask you about the foramen. Okay, and then this mental foramina goes out, of course, with the chin. That's the mental part. You got to know the mental part just because I think it's funny. Yeah, and messed up. All right, so with that, we're going to go to the axial, the rest of the axial skeleton. We're going to go to vertebral column. Very interesting thing, right? So here is your vertebral column. And basically you have it divided into 5 sections. Okay, you have a cervical section, thoracic, lumbar, sacrum, and coccyx. Now we're going to see first what is the function for this vertebral spinal column, right? Vertebral or spinal column. First thing, of course, is protection. You need to protect your spinal cord. You know, if spinal cord gets damaged, that means paralysis from that part down where the cord gets damaged, right? Also, protection of internal organs, so that's important. Is very important for attachment of ligaments and tendons and muscles for your back. Of course, structural support. We need to support the head, the shoulders, the chest, and basically the whole body. Right? Flexibility and mobility. Right? We have to move around. So very, very important aspect. Now, this is a good thing to really know what the vertebral column is good for. So when you go for flexion, those are words you absolutely have to know. Okay, so flexion, you bend forward, right? Extension, what is extension? Opposite of flexion, you bend backwards. Side bending. Now, what is this side bending? Okay, let's do side bending to the right. Hello, side bending to the left. Your left, my left, your left. So side bending is side to side. All right. When you say rotation, that's not side bending. That is moving around, rotating, right? Rotating right, rotating left. Thank you. Vertebral column. Okay. Combination of everything. Right. Okay. So other functions of the spinal column, you know that it can produce blood cells because it has red marrow, right, inside those spongy bones. And of course, like with all the rest of the bones of the body, is also a mineral storage, especially calcium and phosphorus, mainly calcium. So now the spinal curves. There are four main curves, right? So you have two primary curves. What does that mean, primary curve? Curve you're born with, okay? The primary is like baby's born with it. That's the thing you call primary. So those are the thoracic and sacral. So let's look over here. So those are your primary curves. Thoracic curve, big curve right here, and the sacral curve right there. So when the baby is born, the baby doesn't have this curve here, this lumbar curve, and it doesn't have the cervical curve either. Okay, so when you look, these other curves, okay, secondary curves, they are going to develop later. Now look at the shape of these curves. The primary curves here, they are convex. That means they are curving to the outside of the body. Okay, so that's the convex. Concave curves, those are going to be your secondary curves, and they're going to curve to the inside of the body. Okay, so you got to know the convex and the concave. The two convex ones, those are your primary ones. Now you say, well, really, I mean, when the baby is born, you don't have those concave curves. So how is it that the baby looks like when the baby is born? Anybody has babies here? Seen a baby? Huh? They look like what? Like a C, like a comma. So I put a picture here. I thought you'd never seen a baby before, so I put a picture of a baby. Newborn baby there. They look like a comma shaped. Look at that. They only have those primary curves. Okay? Actually, this one you can see a bit of a cervical curve right there. But they basically have those primary curves. And as when the baby develops and starts to hold the head up, then they're going to and start to crawl and start to walk, then the other curves are going to come to develop. So those are milestones for spinal curve development. Okay. So you have 26 vertebrae, and those are divided into 3 regions. Now, this you have to know because you just have to. Okay, sorry. Cervical vertebra. You have 7 of them here. Cervical, that means for your neck. Okay, 7 of them over here. Then you have your thoracic vertebra. Those are 12. And then you have your lumbar vertebra, and there are 5 of them. Okay. Now, of course, you have your sacral and coccyx over here, but those bones, they get fused, right? You're going to look at them last. Okay. How are you going to remember this? That is your mnemonic. I ate breakfast at 7, so that's your cervical. I ate lunch at 12, and I go to A&P class at 5. You're going to remember that? People who don't come to class, I guess they will not do very well on the test on this side, right? Okay. Well, the original mnemonic is I eat breakfast at 7, lunch at 12, and dinner at 5. I want to know who eats dinners at 5. I mean, you eat dinner at 5? Oh my God. Okay. So that's a very healthy way of eating dinner. No. Okay, so if you like to eat your dinner at 5, eat your dinner at 5. But then a lot of people say, I eat dinner at 6 or 7 or 8, and that's not the amount of vertebra that we have in the lumbar. Okay, so in this class, we all eat dinner at 5. We all come to class at 5. Yeah.
The way I remember is I come home at 5, like kind of like a job, like a 9 to 5.
Oh, I come home at 5, but then how are you going to remember that's your lumbar? At the bottom, at the end of the night, okay, whatever makes you remember that the lumbar has 5, that's fine with me, okay? 5 vertebrae. You gotta remember the 7, 12. Now, not only you gotta remember their numbers, but you have to remember the characteristics. Some of them are very, very easy to differentiate. Impossible, I just closed that email. Ignore the bling. Okay, so how are you going to differentiate that? So first we're going to look at general features of the vertebrae. Okay, so first thing you're going to notice, most of the vertebrae, not all of them, most of them have this bulky osseous thing here that is called the body, okay, vertebral body. That's the first thing you're going to notice. Then, of course, you're going to notice that they have a central hole. So that thing is called vertebral foramen. Okay, so that's the central hole over there. What is the hole for? Spinal cord hole. Okay. Then you have this pointy thing on the back. Okay, so this is the back of the person on the back. You have this pointing thing on the back that's called spinous process. Okay. And you're going to have other processes that go to the sides, and those are called transverse processes. And you got 2 of them, one on this side, one on this side. Okay, absolutely have to know that. Then you have connection of these 2 processes, of the spinous and transverse process, and this thing in the middle here is called lamina. Okay, so this thing that connects both of them, that's this thing here, circle here, this is the lamina. And what connects the transverse process to the body, that is called the pedicle, right there. So you have 2 pedicles, 2 lamina, 2 transverse process, 1 hole in the middle, 1 body, 1 spinous process. You absolutely have to know that. Okay, so looking sideways at the column, you see that a lot of these columns here are going to have this superior process. What? Superior what? Articular process. That means it's going to be talking to the bone that is on top of it. So this superior process is going to stick out of the bone, because that's what processes do, right? And they are going to get together with this other one that is called inferior articular facet. So, by the way, you have process and a facet. You got to distinguish between them. Process is the thing that sticks out. So in between this process and the other one that is up here, you're going to have a little smooth area. That's what you call the facet. Okay, this is a smooth area on top of the process right here. There's going to be between for the connection of the 2 bones here. And these holes that you see when you look sideways, okay, those are called intervertebral. Let's make sure you get this down properly. Intervertebral foramina. That means if you look only at one of those bones, you're not going to see the hole. You're only going to see a part of it. You have to put them together to stack them up so you can see those holes that are going to form. Okay, so those are between the vertebra, intervertebral, between 2 things. Okay, and this is where you're going to have nerves, spinal nerves, that are going to come out like that's this way. Okay, that they're going to come out of your spinal cord and go to the body. Okay, so let's see here. This is all put together, and okay, this is very important to distinguish. Vertebral arch. Okay, now I know if you look in the textbook, you're going to see 200 parts for this bone, right? There's like parts here, parts there, little names here, little names there. We're going to only focus on the ones that are very prominent, the ones that are really important to know. Okay, so this is their vertebral arch, and that's pretty much all the parts that you have to know. Now you're going to have to distinguish them and know what the parts are for. Okay, so we see here that the foramina is for the vertebral canal, right? It's for the spinal cord. It's going to go in this main hole here in the center. And let me see here. We look at the transverse process, spinous process. Now, look here. Those spinal processes are mainly pointing down. Okay, so this you're going to have more practice when you go to the lab, right? When you look at the spinal bones. And if you flip the bone the other way and the process is pointing up, you know they have the bone upside down. So those processes have always to be pointing down. So let's see what is important to know here. Well, that's yeah, just fill in the blank, right? So here you have your superior articular facet, okay, that is in a process. So the smooth part is called the facet. And that is what is going to allow joints with other bones. In this case, we see other types of facets. Then in this case here, this is going to be a thoracic bone because it's going to connect with the I forgot the name, ribs. There you go. Okay, so curvatures that we looked at, therefore, and now there are other abnormal curvatures. Of course, this is only for your information. We're not going to be tested on types of abnormal things. But kyphosis, right? So this is the one that's like a hunchback type of curvature. This is a type of curvature that can develop with age if you don't have a good posture. So everybody please sit up straight and remember to walk straight and not like that. Otherwise you can develop this type of curvature, right? Lordosis is the opposite type of curvature. So now it's too much in the back. And actually this type of curvature is seen, normally seen in pregnant women because with a huge belly pulling you to the front, I mean the center there. The center of gravity kind of shifts, right? So in order to keep your body straight and not fall on your face, you have to compensate and do this lordosis business, right? And you can imagine if you have more than one baby growing in there, you gotta even compensate a little more, right? But yeah, that's why also you get a lot of pregnant women with back problems. It's a lot of weight to carry around. And then this type of curvature that goes to the sides, right, to the laterals, that is also, of course, not normal, is called scoliosis. And that is also commonly seen, and many levels and different problems with it. Okay. So now, cervical vertebrae, those vertebrae, right? So those are the ones in your neck. How many you have? 7, right? 7. Now we're going to look at 1 and 2, okay? First one here is called atlas. Cervical, we number them based on the first letter, so C, like C1 through C7, that's going to be your cervical curvature here, cervical vertebrae. So the first one is called the atlas. And this is one that is very different from all of the other vertebrae. The second one also has a bit of a strange name. It's called the axis. So first one atlas, second one axis. And a very interesting thing of the axis is that it has this indentation here. It's called the dens. It looks like a tooth is sticking out of there. That is going to help with the movement of the first vertebra, okay, in this pivoting area. So the first one is called the Atlas because of this Greek god that was carrying the world on its head. And this Atlas is very much round. Okay, that's why they call it, I don't know, the globe, the Atlas globe. Okay. Okay, what is important to know here? This one has, okay, superior articular facets that are very important for contacting the head bones. Okay, so the head is going to be sitting over there, and this is why you can like say yes, this because of your superior articular facets. So this helps your head to know the yes. Nod, yes. Then you have here your inferior articular facets. So this is the same atlas, but looked from the bottom side. Okay, looking from the bottom view, you're going to have your inferior articular facets, and that is going to be important for connection with C2. Okay, so we have very prominent places of attachment here. Okay. If you look at these protuberances over here, you have a posterior tubercle is a little indentation, okay, coming out of the bone, and anterior tubercle, but it's not very much noticeable. It's just a little bit of an indentation there. Now, this part of the bone is called the posterior arch, and of course, this lower part of the bone is called the anterior arch. Now, the C1 has this transverse foramen. This is a hole on the side, okay, by the transverse process. This is a hole right there at the process. This is one, did I mention here? One of the distinguishing characteristics of those vertebrae. Okay. Now, here, when you look at this part of the bone, at your anterior arch, you're going to have here this facet or this little leveling place here for the dens. That's the part that's going to stick out of the C2. Remember, dens is in the C2. Okay, so when you put them together, okay, I did mention all cervical vertebrae have transverse foramina right there. Okay, so when you put them together, look, C1 is up here. Okay, and this is a facet for the dens right there. And then C2 is right here with the dens right over there. Okay, and you can imagine this is really with ligaments that are going to keep this together. Okay, so C1 sits on the C2. C2 also has a different name. It's kind of special. It's called the axis. All right, so axis is your C2. So this, let me see here. What is important to know? We mentioned about the dens. So this is the dens. This is the back of your neck, right? This is the dens. And you don't see really a body. You do have a spinous process in the front. And yeah, you have the lamina. They're connecting the process. What else is important to know about C2? Transverse foramen. You see over there? It has those little holes. Transverse foramen. And the opening, the vertebral foramen, is kind of round. Okay, so this is a characteristic for your cervical vertebrae. Okay, so that's your dens, transverse process, spinous process. Oh yes, this is very important to know. The spinous process is bifurcated. It has two little sides, but I have better pictures of that. Okay, so here we see a lot better. Okay, all cervical vertebrae, all of them have bifurcated. That means it has two little things sticking out. Spinous process. So this is a giveaway when you look at a picture of a vertebra and you see these two little things sticking out. That is a giveaway that's a cervical vertebra. Okay, the other ones don't have that. Okay. So here you see C1. Of course, C1 is the oddball. C1 doesn't have that. Because you can say, oh, look, C1 doesn't have it. Yeah, I know. C1 is odd. Okay. But C2 to C7, they have it. Okay. So you see those little things here, you know where this thing belongs. Okay. Now, when you look at, of course, lower than C2, so C3 to C7, you see that this opening here is not like C1 that is round. So this here, the vertebral foramen here, is kind of triangular. Okay, so if you see something like this, you're going to say, okay, what are characteristics of this vertebra? Do I see the two things sticking out? Yes, so you know that thing is cervical. Now, just to make sure, you're going to see those openings, the foramen on the sides. Okay, that's a giveaway. And this triangular shape for vertebral foramen is also another giveaway. Okay. Okay, so the openings on the sides, the foramen, the lateral foramen here, that is very much used for arteries to go up to the head. Okay, so that's why those very prominent cervical lateral foramen. So the last vertebra here of the cervix, of the cervical, has, not cervix, different part of the body. Okay, so the last one here is very easy to find. It has this very prominent protuberance right there. So if you kind of put your head to the front and you touch the back, so let's all find C7, right? And you find that bone that is sticking out, that's your C7. So that's the last one for your cervical. Okay. Vertebra. It's also a landmark. Then after the C7, you go to, what's the number that comes next? T1. All right, T1. So now we go to thoracic vertebra. Okay. They are looking very different than the cervical ones, right? So this one, you're going to have other characteristics. You're going to have facets or costal facets. They're going to be for rib attachments. Okay, so you have superior costal facet, and you're going to have inferior costal facet. You can see very well here, but other pictures are better. But those are really for your rib attachments. So how many vertebrae you have for the thoracic? 12. Guess how many ribs you have? 12. It's not a coincidence. Okay, so 12 ribs and 12 vertebral, thoracic vertebrae. Okay, now look at the typical vertebrae, what it looks like for the thorax. Did you see this in the lab already? Yeah. Oh, so just a second nature, you don't have to spend a lot of time on it, right? Good? So just what you have to know for this part, for the test, that's enough. All right, cool. So look at this guy here. What does it look like? A giraffe. There we go. I like to think it looks like a giraffe. Here are the eyes of the giraffe. Those are little antennas and spinous process on the back. So here is the body, right? Very round here, vertebral foramen, right? And everything else is about the same. So let me see what's important here. Circular vertebral foramen. That is important to identify your thoracic vertebra. And what else is important to know here? Okay, we have 12 thoracic vertebrae because you have 12 ribs. We're going to see the ribs on Wednesday. And what is important to know here? Okay, basic shape of that. You have the body, right? The relatively big body. And you do have those points of attachment. You have the spinous process that is very prominent and facing down, and those facets. Let's see what else do we need to know. Okay, so that brings us to the lumbar vertebra. How many of them? 5. All right. So 5 lumbar vertebrae. Those are the strongest bones for the spinal column. Okay. So you have 5 of them, and they are very thick and they're very strong because they have to support the weight of the rest of the body, right? So they have to be very, very solid. Now that, and they fit in each other like quite tightly. So that is advantageous for support, but is not very advantageous for motion, like for movement. So they don't move as much as the others. So characteristic is square, spinous process when you look from the side, very solid body, and kind of looks like a moose. Okay, so that is bringing us to the bottom of the column, and we get here the sacrum, right? So the sacrum, when you are born, these bones are not fused. So after development, then these bones will fuse. It's about five bones or so that will fuse here. Now, what you see with this fusion of the bones that is very characteristic, first is this medial sacral crust. So this is reminiscent of here. Okay, so I guess this crust right there is reminiscent of fusion of spinal processes. Okay, and also you have from the sides these lateral sacral crusts, that those are reminiscence of transverse processes that have fused. Okay. What is more important to know here? Okay, this part right here, the articular surface right here, this is important because it is for attachment with the hip bone. Okay, so this is a part that is kind of like concave here, and it's very important for that attachment. Okay, so those are the main things that you have to know about the sacrum. Stereo. Okay, so here is another picture of your sacrum showing those places for attachments, okay, for your hip bone. So that's your iliac bone. And here showing the fused vertebra that you can see here, reminiscence of the fusion. Okay, this articular surface that is very important for that attachment. Okay, and this we're going to see next, on Wednesday about the symphysis. This is on the joints. Okay. And the last part of the column is the coccyx, and that is, I guess, a telltale sign that we evolved from ancestors that actually had tails, because we don't, right? But the coccyx is still there. What is the use for the coccyx? Tailbone? Basically useless, since we don't have a tail, right? Unless you practice some sports, and then if you fall on it, it hurts like hell. I guess that's a use. But yeah, basically has not much articulation that is important, and not much use either. Okay. We also got to know that these are fused bones. Okay, some people have 3, some other people can have up to 5. So a different number of bones are fused at the tailbone. So here is a little summary slide for how you can differentiate the different parts of the spinal column. So you have the top one, which is this type of characteristics with the foramen, lateral foramen, and bifurcated process. That's the cervical, right? Make sure, write it down, make sure you identify this. And the giraffe is thoracic. And then the moose, I guess it does look like a moose here, lumbar. All right. So everybody can differentiate this. You're comfortable with that? Yeah. And look at that. We are done a bit early. Do we have questions? Are you all good? We go ace the test. Yeah, hopefully.